Is your Spanish study a waste of time? In our last video, I talked about the top 3 mistakes that you're probably making every time you study Spanish. These are the mistakes that will waste your time and move you away from your goal of being fluent. Now let's talk about how to replace those mistakes with study habits that will be much more impactful, things that you can do to save time and move faster toward fluency every single day. Here's what we'll do. First, I'll show you how to replace time-wasting repetition with a much better strategy for putting productive variety into your daily Spanish practice. Second, we'll talk about some useful strategies for practicing Spanish out loud, even when you're on your own. Finally, I'll go over a Spanish study routine that you can use on a daily basis to move you toward fluency faster than ever. If you've ever been overwhelmed, feeling like studying Spanish is just too much work that's going nowhere, then you're in the right place. The strategies in this video will take away the overwhelm and cut down your Spanish study to what's important. Let's get started. First, we need to talk about replacing repetition with productive variety. When you're working on learning new things in Spanish, repetition is very tempting. Repeating yourself feels productive because you quickly get better at saying specific scripted phrases. When you say, ¿De dónde son ustedes? Over and over, it feels like you've mastered it. But according to research, there's a much more effective way to master a language. For example, let's say you're working on practicing greetings and introductions. Maybe it takes a few uses of ¿De dónde son ustedes? Before you feel like you can say it smoothly, understanding what you're saying while you say it. That's fine, but here's the secret. As soon as you can just barely say this phrase comfortably, stop. And then switch to start practicing something else. This may sound strange, but the surprising truth is that when you over-practice something specific, it's actually bad for your learning. It's better to stop and switch to something else as soon as you've started to master something. Switching between different topics feels frustrating in the short term, but it's much better for your learning in the long term. Now, a great way to do this is actually to switch randomly between different things that you're working on. Let's say that in addition to those greetings and introductions that you're working on, you've also been practicing a few other things recently, including, say, the conjugations of the verb hacer. In this case, what you should do is randomly mix up the different things that you're learning. That way you're not just practicing one thing at a time, you're practicing all the things that you're learning in an unpredictable way. Mixing up your learning like this is great for all kinds of reasons. For one thing, research shows that varied learning, instead of strictly repetitive learning, is much better for long-term memory. It may feel less rewarding in the short term, but it lasts much longer. For another thing, it's a whole lot more like real life. In face-to-face conversations, you're not going to say the same thing over and over. Instead, you're going to have to switch unpredictably between various topics. If you use randomness in your study, you're preparing for that. Now, how do we do this? I strongly recommend using flashcards, either physical flashcards or digital flashcards. When you do, you can easily shuffle what you're working on, and boom, your practice is now randomized. Ta-da! You've achieved the goal of practicing unpredictably with productive variety. For some specific tips on how to practice with Spanish flashcards, I did a whole video series on this, so make sure to check those out. Next, let's talk about how to practice out loud. This is one of the core secrets, one of the reasons that most people won't become fluent, but you will. Practicing out loud is easy to ignore because it seems like extra work. You're probably already overwhelmed. Learning a language is a lot of work. Speaking out loud seems like just one more thing to add to the long list. Or is it? The fact is, speaking Spanish is a skill, a physical skill like riding a bike or swimming. So speaking Spanish out loud is not just another item on the long list, it's perhaps the most important thing for learning the skill of speaking Spanish. Here's an important habit that I recommend getting into. Every time you come across a Spanish sentence that seems valuable, say it out loud. But don't stop there. Let's say you come across the sentence, lo hicimos con él. This sentence uses a conjugation of hacer, which you're wanting to practice at this time, so it seems like it'll be worth practicing this sentence out loud. If your instinct is to read it and to say it out loud, that's a good thing to do, but that's not enough. Afterwards, look away from the text and say it out loud again while thinking the meaning. Lo hicimos con él. If you can say lo hicimos con él in Spanish while looking away from the text, you're one step closer to confidently saying things like this in face-to-face settings when you can't see Spanish written out in front of you. Alright, now it's time for the part that you've been waiting for, a Spanish study routine that will save you all kinds of time on your path to fluency. This is where we'll put it all together and talk about what you should be doing every single day if you want to be fluent. This Spanish study routine is for serious Spanish learners, not people who are just trying to entertain themselves, but people like you who are serious about not wasting time when learning a language. Here's the routine that will get you fluent in Spanish. Part 1. Do some shuffled quizzing work. Every day, start your routine with some quizzing in Spanish, randomized quizzing that jumps around between different topics in Spanish. The simplest way to do this is with flashcard techniques, as I talked about earlier in this video. But to start with this, there's a barrier to entry if you don't already have a large set of flashcards that cover the most important Spanish for where you currently are in the language. If you don't want to spend hours every week creating personalized flashcards, I'll describe later in this video how to access hundreds of flashcards that cover the essential Spanish vocabulary and sentence structures that will get you fluent. Either way, starting your Spanish routine with shuffled quizzing will get you off to a great start every day, sharpening your mental readiness and attention for working on Spanish. Part 2. Do some speaking out loud in Spanish. If you're serious about Spanish fluency, you need to do some speaking out loud every single day. I recommend making your goal at least 3 sentences a day, even if you're just studying on your own. But what sentences should you say out loud? You can find Spanish sentences in various places, textbooks, blogs, articles you're reading, and so on. But what's most important is to find resources that are fine-tuned to your specific level of Spanish so that you're stretching your abilities little by little every day. The thing is, if you try to work on Spanish that's way beyond your abilities, it won't really be productive because you won't be understanding it, and you'll obviously get frustrated, which isn't the attitude that you want to feel towards Spanish. But of course, if it's too easy, you won't be growing. If you've watched any of our other videos, you probably know how strongly I recommend having a Spanish coach to help connect you with the exact resources that you need based on your current strengths and weaknesses every single week. And yes, coaching is typically much more expensive than simple Spanish tutoring, so it can be too costly for many people. But at the end of this video, I'll show you how to explore options for finding a Spanish coach that gets you the best bang for your buck, including as many opportunities as possible for speaking Spanish face-to-face. But I also have one more tip for speaking out loud during your study. After you practice saying a Spanish sentence out loud, try making it your own. What this means is not just parroting the exact Spanish sentence that you've read or listened to, but also coming up with your own variation on the sentence. For example, let's say you just practiced the sentence, lo hicimos con él. You might then think for a second and come up with the sentence, lo haré con ella. See, that changes the meaning, but it uses the same sentence structure. And hey, it's a Spanish sentence that you basically came up with on your own. This is an extremely valuable habit for taking the things that you're learning in Spanish and turning them into real fluency. If you try to do this every day, it's one way to make this second step in the routine, speaking out loud, as productive as possible. Part 3 of the routine, write in Spanish. At the end of your study routine every single day, write at least a couple of sentences in Spanish. Try to focus on the things that you've found challenging lately. For example, if you're still working on mastering your subjunctive conjugations of hacer, write a few sentences that use haga, hagamos, and so on. Then, this is very important, send those sentences to a native speaker for feedback. Writing in Spanish is much more valuable if you can actually get feedback on how you're doing to make sure that you're practicing right, not practicing errors. But what if you don't have native speakers in your life who are helping you work on Spanish? Where should you send your sentences? I would say that everyone should sign up to have a personal coach who will always be there for you, correcting your sentences and giving you custom-tailored materials to move you to the next level. But a language coach usually costs something like $500 a month, which makes it prohibitively expensive for many Spanish learners. However, right now we're offering a service that will allow you to have a personal Spanish coach for a much more affordable price. If you're really serious about making the most of your Spanish study and speaking Spanish confidently within months, then this is the smartest way to move forward. Here's the thing. Usually, Spanish coaching is expensive because meeting face-to-face with a high-performance linguistic expert is not cheap. But we've tweaked two things to make it more affordable. First, instead of one-on-one calls with your coach, you'll be matched with a small group of students to practice face-to-face with a coach on video calls. The groups are generally about 3 or 4 students, a very small class size, so that it's super productive for conversation practice. This maximizes the amount of Spanish conversation that we can give you, so you'll actually get 2 hours a week of face-to-face conversation with your coach and a few other students. We'll also make sure that you're specifically matched with Spanish students who are right at your own level. That way you won't get overwhelmed and can build your confidence step by step. We've tried this method out with hundreds of students now, and we've seen that it works incredibly well for building Spanish conversation abilities quickly, no matter what level of Spanish student you currently are. Second, even when you're not on those calls, your coach will be available for you to help you with anything you need. For example, if you find that you're having trouble using subjunctives in certain contexts, your coach will supply you with a wealth of practice materials on that subject. But since your coach knows you and works with you closely, they'll make sure that those materials are right at your level and exactly what you need in order to master this skill before your next conversation. No more hunting the internet for grammar resources or practice materials. Your coach will find or create anything you need as a part of your membership. This guarantees that you'll keep moving forward toward fluency consistently, not in fits and starts. So just imagine how amazing it'll be to follow the study routine that I described in this video day by day, but also to have multiple face-to-face Spanish conversations every week. Especially if those face-to-face conversations are always positive and encouraging, not overwhelming or discouraging. This coaching plan is guaranteed to build your speaking and listening confidence consistently week by week. You can read more details at the link in the description of this video. Either way, if you're done being overwhelmed and frustrated by study methods that don't work, and if you're ready to shortcut your way to real fluency, stop wasting time on outdated learning techniques. Start following the routine that I shared today and consider hiring a Spanish coach to guarantee that you finally achieve Spanish fluency.